topic of obviously ghosts, spirits,
yeah.
demons,
yeah,
and all kinds of other scary things that
paranormal
stuff that people say that they encounter.
Yeah.
So,
which is quite common, isn't it?
Very common.
A lot of people
very common.
I've spoken to sort of say, oh yeah, it's generally something that people love talking about, isn't it? Because it's just the unknown and the kind of the mysterious and, ooh, did we see that or didn't we? And where did that come from? So yeah, it's generally something it's quite a popular subject, isn't it?
And yeah, I think pretty much every faith around the world as well has a belief in a spiritual realm.
Yeah, definitely.
Of one sort or another, and of ghosts and of demons, of good spirit beings and evil spirit beings. So it's something that's very kind of common to all of the human race.
Yeah.
And lots of people have different experiences. I can't ever say that I've ever seen a ghost.
No.
But I've had experiences, especially as a minister and as a Christian, of, I would say, demonic encounters, exorcisms, things like that. So after seeing those things, I'm fully convinced that demons are real. And I would say that I've had a couple of encounters that are angelic.
Yeah.
Although it tends to be that angelic encounters seem to be more rare or more hidden than demonic encounters. I think demonic encounters are quite commonplace.
You always hear more so, don't you, of demonic than an angelic thing,
Yeah, whereas I think angels are just as active, but they're more hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. It feels like whenever you hear anyone speak about they've had some sort of spiritual, weird, demonic encounter, it's very clear in their minds, isn't it? And it's very kind of, they know exactly what they heard, what they saw, what they experienced, whatever. But like you say, if it's an angelic thing, it doesn't seem to be quite as obvious, maybe.
It doesn't grab attention.
It doesn't grab attention.
It's more subtle.
I suppose you could say, because in a way, a demon is kind of wanting to grab attention. It wants to kind of, torment, and it wants to kind of deceive somebody. So I suppose it will try its utmost to do whatever it can, like you said, to grab attention, like move an object or whatever, or, sort of have some sort of weird image in the corner of the room, like a black image. Whereas with an angel, I mean, I've never had like an angelic type experience, but I do definitely believe that I have angels that look after me and
well, you
family.
mentioned that one time when you were a little child and
yes,
tombstone fell on you.
I was just going to say, I've never seen anything, but I've
but
felt and I believe definitely that there have been angels in my life, and many a time, but just not ever seen or heard. Whereas like normally, like you with like people that speak about a demonic thing, they normally see and hear something more so. Whereas,
and there's a craziness to the demonic as well. There's like screaming and shouting and fits and convulsions and very incredible strength
sinister
and
stuff, isn't it?
It's horrible. And there's an atmosphere that comes with it.
Yes.
I mean, there have been many times in church where we've been worshipping and I've really felt the presence, I would say, of the Holy Spirit and angels around us.
Yeah.
That there is a presence in that room that is so loving and peaceful and joyful.
Yes.
There's something otherworldly there, but it's really nice.
Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah,
I've been in situations where I would say a demon or demons have been controlling an area, and it's just felt absolutely oppressive, horrible. You can't breathe because the weight of the air pressing down on you is so it's just horrible. It's a horrible situation.
Yeah.
But you've had experiences in the past of seeing things.
Yes.
And like
a ghostly leg.
Tell us about the ghostly leg. The ghostly calf muscle.
Okay, so this is when I was working in a hotel doing like chambermaid work. I needed to make a few extra pennies because I've always been a hairdresser, so it was just like a job that I'd taken on, and I hadn't actually been there very long, to be honest. So, and it was only something I did once or twice a week, whatever. Not that that matters, but just, telling you about the story. So, this was, so I went into work, and this was always on like a morning, so I always did like morning shifts there, and went about my job as I always do, as you do as a chambermaid. You just clock in and whatever, and you go to get your rooms that you're going to clean, etc. And this specific day, one of the floors, because certain people would be allotted to certain floors, if you like, for whatever reasons, depending on their shift pattern, whatever. And in this hotel, there was like on the very bottom basement floor, this specific floor was like allotted to this one person, Claudette. And I'll never forget her name, because I suppose the reason people would remember it is like, oh, that's Claudette's floor, is because it had this, everybody was like, oh no, you don't want to do Claudette's floor. Claudette's floor is like haunted, it's weird. There's like weird feeling down there, it just feels dark. It feels like, really? I was like, oh right, okay. So it'd be like, no, only Claudette does that floor. And if she's off, then wow, it's whoever draws the short straw, like, you know, to do that floor. So it just so happened that day I drew the short straw and I had to do Claudette's floor when she was away. So yeah, anyway, to be honest, I just got on with it, as you do, and didn't think too much about it.
And this is like the bottom floor of the hotel, isn't it? The basement floor
of the hotel, yes. Yeah. So it's very like quite dingy, quite dark, quite sort of, you know, there wasn't a lot going on down there. Whereas the other floors, you kind of see more people, hear things, there seemed to be more going on. This just almost weirdly had a strange feel to it. When you went down there, it'd almost feel quite just dark and dingy and kind of just very sinisterly, extremely quiet, you know. And so whatever, but I carried on with my job, as you do, started at the top, worked the way down, and I was cleaning this one room, and I just had this very strange feeling when I was cleaning the room that I could just feel something just staring at me. It just felt like, you know, when you've ever had that feeling, if somebody's looking at you, you kind of know it, don't you? You can feel it. It's like the eyes burning into the back of your head.
You turn around and you see somebody staring at you, right?
You know, like,
you feel it.
You feel it, exactly. So I could just feel, like, as I was cleaning this sink, I could just feel something staring at me, but it was so weird because I knew nobody was down there. And the reason I knew nobody was down there is because I was told that they were all outs, these rooms, so everybody was whatever, they were all out for the day, or they left, so you'd be cleaning out the room. There's nobody around,
so no guests there.
No guests there.
There was no other workers down there.
No other workers, nothing like that. That's what I mean. It was just totally quiet, just me, and that was it. So and if somebody did come down, because they had a few sets of doors in between the rooms, like heavy big doors. And they weren't like soft closing doors like you get these days. They were like clonky doors, so you'd hear it clonk, you know, it'd be quite loud when they'd come through. You would know that somebody had come down, and they were quite creaky floors as well. Like, so you would hear and you'd know. So yeah, there's definitely nobody there, but I could just feel like, something staring at me. And then I just sort of paused for a minute and thought, that's weird, and then turned. And then as I turned, I just saw a glimpse of this like translucent calf muscle. So weird.
It's random, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really weird. Like, just, it was almost like whatever it was didn't want me to see it and quickly moved because it knew I'd turned, and it was like somebody had just ran past the door, you know, like they were quick, get away. And I just saw this last bit, because where I was in the room, it was just like a little door, of course, which leads into the in the bathroom area, which leads into the bedroom. And so, you know, I just got a shot with this by the door of this leg, just bypassed, you know, this bit of calf muscle. And but it was, it was translucent. It was really
And it was
weird.
a bare leg?
It was a bare leg,
Yep.
So there's no trousers or anything on it. It was just like a bare leg,
Because what we've looked at is like in that kind of area, that was like Roman settlements around there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously Romans, I think, from the pictures that I've seen, they've got that kind of like skirty thing with the bare leg, right?
With the bare leg, and it was a muscular leg.
A muscular leg. A muscular Roman leg.
It really was. So because I hadn't have thought until we started discussing this, I hadn't have thought anything of that.
Yeah.
And then when we looked into it and we discussed it a bit more and we realised the history there.
The history of that area, yeah.
We thought, oh yeah, well that would kind of make sense. When you said about the bare leg, I thought, well yeah, it was like a muscular looking leg. I mean, I even got a quick shot of it, but I could see the leg, the shape of it and everything, you know. But yeah, it was just so bizarre. It was like a real weird thing. I've just seen like a translucent calf muscle. Like,
and what's weird about where that hotel is, obviously the location, the ancient location of it.
Yeah.
But also it's the bottom floor
Yeah.
is where people would have walked in the past,
that's right? Correct. Yeah.
Whereas the upper floors that
it wouldn't have,
where people don't see anything, they're brand new.
This brand new,
and there wouldn't have been people walking up. They've been walking in the sky, basically, wouldn't
they? Exactly.
Up there. So, yeah, that's kind of weird. So
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what is that? I mean, obviously there'll be some people who say, well, that's the spirit of a departed person or a departed Roman soldier and stuff. But it just seems odd that they would still look like Roman soldiers or have a bare leg and stand there with a calf muscle. I mean, it doesn't make any sense if you're a spirit. So kind of what options do we have? I mean, one option that's been put forward by some people is that it's kind of almost like a loop.
You said, before.
Like you keep on replaying a video over and over and over, because sometimes people talk about these spirits as if they are repeating the same actions and saying the same things. And whether these kind of manifestations or these sightings are real spirits or whether it's like almost like an imprint on time that keeps on triggering and replaying, that's a possibility.
It's generally similar sort of thing, isn't it? When you hear of like this ghost does whatever, it's generally the same sort of thing.
They appear in the same spot, they look the same way, are dressed the same way, they say the same thing, and it keeps on looping. And whether it's kind of like some kind of impression on time that under certain circumstances people see, that's a possibility. Another possibility is that they're in the afterlife, these spirits, but we're actually seeing their torment. They're almost like, because it's looping, they're reliving the same memories over and over. And I can remember Jesus saying, in hell, the worm never dies.
Yeah.
And
just continual.
Yeah, it's that same
on and
torment
on.
over
Same torment.
and over and over.
Yeah,
so they're reliving maybe moments on earth over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And often it's traumatic moments. And then every now and then maybe we get a peek.
We see it, I
don't know.
It's odd, isn't it?
I don't know.
Would we see that though?
I don't know.
I would veer more personally. You know what I think? I personally would veer more to a demonic spirit, just trying to manifest itself and deceive someone. I mean, they've got their. We said this before, didn't we? Well, why? Why would it do that? But then they'll do anything to try and deceive and get people intrigued into the spirit realm. Then, of course, they will start tapping into like psychic stuff and tapping into like Ouija boards and things like that, which they then could open a door for something satanic, couldn't they, to come in and whatever. So I would say, like, in a way, it's kind of developing intrigue in someone, perhaps, to think, ooh, because it's in, people have a natural intrigue in the spiritual realm, don't they? So it's kind of like, I would say, personally, what I believe anyway, that I would say it's that. And it's just trying to deceive somebody to, like I say, entice them into doing something like that, so that then they're then tapping into the dark realm, if you like.
Yeah. I think the Bible's very clear that as human beings, we live one life, we die, and then we face judgment.
Exactly. Yeah. And heaven or hell.
When we die, there's either you go into the presence of God or you're shut out of the presence of God.
Yeah.
And there are instances in the scriptures, there's only a few, but there are instances where the dead have reappeared on earth. So if you think of somebody like Samuel, who was called up by the witch of Endor, he appeared, Saul was shocked. And obviously at that point they were seeing through the veil. Yeah. I mean, Samuel, of course, would have been in paradise, which is a part of Sheol, and they were seeing through the veil at that point, and Samuel was saying, why have you disturbed me? You do have kind of Moses and Elijah appearing at the Transfiguration, they kind of come through. Just trying to think.
The only other thing is the Legion, the chap that was
there's the demonic encounters.
Demonic, I suppose I'm thinking of that. So
I'm trying to think if there's any other occasions where people see through, apart from the parables of Jesus where he talks about the rich man and Lazarus, where people see into the spiritual realm. I'm thinking of Elisha's servant.
Then isn't that in paradise? That's not like somebody seeing that on earth.
What, the parable?
Yeah.
No, it's Jesus explaining
He's
kind of
explaining, yeah.
Yeah, and
But
then
it's
you've got the
kinda
angelic encounter, haven't you, with Elisha's servant. And Elisha's servant's kind of worried and panicking because the kings are coming against them. And Elisha says, Lord, open his eyes. And when he opens his eyes, he looks around.
Yeah, true. And he sees
and there are
the
angels
armies.
all around.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
I mean, with these things, is it a case of, under certain circumstances, that we can kind of see into this spiritual realm for a glimpse? I don't know. And I'm perfectly going to be honest. I think, most of these cases are demonic or they're angelic.
But God could allow that.
God
for whatever
could allow
reason,
anything.
like I suppose in that response, because he wanted to show him, look, you've got all this protection around you.
Yeah.
Just going to do that a minute.
Yeah, and God showed him that, and there is so little that we know about the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Because the Bible primarily focuses on our relationship with God.
Yes, exactly.
And it does talk briefly about heaven and hell. But, you ask most people, what does heaven look like? They probably couldn't tell you. Because the Bible doesn't describe it very much. Or the new heavens and the new earth. There's a description of the new Jerusalem, and there's more detail about that. But the actual heavens and the earth itself,
there's not, is it?
There's
it's
not
only
a lot of description.
The only thing we kind of know and get an idea about is if we hear a testimony of somebody that's had a near-death experience. And they've said a glimpse of what it's like. And sometimes in that glimpse of what they share, it kind of sounds a bit like the new heavens, the new earth in a way, of one of the things we know of how beautiful everything will be. We obviously, that would be the only thing that we would be able to go on in that respect, isn't it? And obviously if you've got so many testimonies sharing the same sort of things about what they see heaven to be like and what they've seen hell to be like, it kind of would go along with what the Bible does describe as like the new heavens, the new earth, and what the Bible does kind of describe as hell. When you hear somebody who's entered hell and they say that they've seen, like, people say like a cannibal, for instance, gross, but like eating their own arm or something repeatedly, because I suppose that would sort of make sense, wouldn't it? Because it's eternal torment, eternal kind of gnashing of teeth and all these things that we know, like eternal darkness, and it kind of would make sense to sort of like, that's what you've done, you reap what you sow, so therefore you relive that thing that you've done over and over. So we suppose we can get a grasp a certain amount of idea, but it still doesn't answer the fact of what is a ghost, where does it come from, because we can't fully say, because even though a demon could manifest as that.
Because even in Jewish folklore, Jewish theology, there were spirits, there were ghosts. Even when Jesus was walking out onto the lake, he says, it's not a ghost,
it's not
it's
a ghost.
me.
That's right, because they believed a lot then, didn't they?
They believed
in
like spirits of the sea that would come out to bring fishermen down to the abyss, basically. That if you saw a spirit walking on the water, it was coming for your soul. And so that's why Jesus kind of reassured them and said, it's not a ghost, it's me.
I'm not a ghost, it's me.
And then there's that kind of weird verse in the book of Acts, and we've talked about this before, where Peter has been released from prison and he's banging on the door.
That's right, yeah.
Is it Rhoda, the servant girl? And she runs back and says, Peter's at the door.
No, he's not.
And they're like,
what?
Nah, it's not Peter. It must be Peter's angel. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that an angel, our angels look like us or sound like us? And if that's the case, and if demons are fallen angels, then they can imitate people. They can look like people and sound like people.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's kind of where the whole kind of a concept of a familiar spirit comes from.
Yes,
that
exactly.
When you're visiting a medium or a seance,
yeah.
and that person begins to speak, and it might sound like them or use their phraseology, it could well be a demon imitating the deceased person, rather than actually being the deceased person.
Yeah, I definitely believe that, because we spoke about this before, and I think you were the one who shared with me about familiar spirits.
Yep.
And I think I said to you about the time when me and my mum both become, because I was living at home back then, both become born again Christians. And we just started getting these weird things happening in our house. And like we'd never had anything weird before. It was a nice house, no problems, whatever, nice feel to it, you know. We started getting like funny bangs that you couldn't account for. And mimicking, like you would hear like this, whatever it was, would mimic myself, my dad, my mum and my brother. So certain times, like my dad would say, would have heard me come home and do the things that I would do, like put the kettle on, hum to myself, whatever, clip-clop down the sort of floor, you know, into the house sort of thing and whatever. He said he'd hear that literally about 10 minutes before I'd come home. And I had exactly the same with my mum. I'd hear her come in, run up the stairs, hum to herself, sing, whatever. And I'd be like, all right, mum, do you want me to make you a coffee or whatever? And be nobody there. And it's just so bizarre. So we had this mimicking thing going on for quite some time. And then it was only really when me and mum realised the power of Jesus in us, the power of God in us, that we could just tell it where to go, knowing that it's obviously not something that should be there because it's weird and it's odd and it's almost slightly sinister because it's weird. And it was we just told it where to go and that was it. Never anything else ever again. It was just, but it was odd. It went on for quite some time. So it was almost.
And you had been involved in the occult before that?
I hadn't been involved in it, no, but I had a friend who was a medium.
Yeah.
Because she was also a hairdresser, and at this particular stage, I was like a trainee hairdresser, so I was still learning a lot. She'd been doing it a long, long time, so I used to go to her house on my days off, and I'd want to learn more from her. So I'd go around there, spend time, and she would start talking to me about how like she's sort of like a practicing medium, and how she's been doing this a while now, and she'd sort of tell me about she does like this spiritual healing stuff over people. And go into all of this, and as she'd be going into it, just talking about it in her house would set stuff off. She'd obviously really opened a door and done it a long time, and you'd hear like bangs in the next room, the radio would turn itself on, nobody else was at home apart from me and her. The kids were out, her husband was out, and there'd be really strange stuff that you couldn't account for. And when I'd sort of say to her, what was that? You know, she said, oh, it's all right. It's my spirit guide just letting me know that they're there, just telling me everything's okay. I'd be like, really? Are they like turning stuff on and like knocking on the door? And
you don't want that kind of spirit guide, do you?
That's really reassuring.
Especially when electricity prices are so high at the moment, you don't want them turning on things that necessarily do. No. But I was speaking to Dr. Hugh Ross, who's a cosmologist.
Right.
And he headed up quite a major UFO research group. And what he discovered is that people who have encounters with quote unquote aliens, like aliens will appear in their bedroom, or they have abduction stories.
Thing,
he said what they discovered is in the vast majority of these cases, people who saw these aliens and had these abduction stories and experiences, the people were also heavily involved in occultic stuff at the same time.
I can believe
and what
that,
they discovered is when they gave up the occult, the alien visitation stopped.
Right, yeah.
And so it would appear that rather than them actually being real aliens, obviously I think a lot of UFO sightings are just technology like new stealth drones and things that the government are testing and trying out, and people think they're lights in the sky. I don't think they're spaceships. But these encounters with these aliens were demonic spirits.
Yeah, I can believe that.
And once they gave up the occult, and a lot of them turned to Christ or turned to God, it stopped.
Yeah, I can totally believe that. I've always thought that myself, to be honest, that any unusual activity, like you say, is either what you said, like techie stuff, whatever, or I've also equally thought it could be demonic stuff, just to, once again, deceive people and whatever. But yeah, no, some of the things I've heard, like going on what you just said about alien encounters and stuff, some of the things I've heard, testimonies of people, it does sound very dark.
Yeah.
It generally is very dark, which would make sense. That flows with like a demonic thing. There was a woman that went on like GMTV or something, I think, and she was sort of speaking about she had this alien husband. You couldn't see him, but apparently he was sat right next to her, so he was invisible, right?
So you can't even do the shopping for him.
So you couldn't do the shopping, whatever. And they were having this genuine conversation with her about this alien husband and what he does and all of these other things and what he's saying, what he's doing. It's so bizarre. But she was genuinely, she really believed it, honestly. Yeah. She was like really serious. She wasn't, you could see she didn't like she was messing around, whether they paid her a lot of money, I don't know. But it seemed very, like she was very assured that this thing existed. And yeah, it was odd because I'm sure, like you say now, I can't remember fully, so I wouldn't like to say bank on it. But whether she mentioned something occultic,
Yeah.
beside that, I can't remember fully, but that would kind of line up with that and tie in with it, definitely. So yeah, I can totally believe that. And it does seem always, like you said, when they have these alien experiences, it's always generally not nice experiences. It's not anything.
It's really pleasant. Yeah.
So that would also make sense, because anything demonic is dark and it wants destruction on humanity. So yeah, that all makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and with all of this, it's like you hear these reports, and you do have to take these reports with a pinch of salt as well. You do have to
because you don't
weigh them and analyse them and look at the person's kind of mental state,
and of course you've got that as
check their character and all of that. So with all of these things, you can never be 100% certain. I think the only thing you can be certain of is what happens to you, is what you experience.
Yeah, and you know what you've seen.
And then you can share that testimony, and whether people believe it or not, well, that's up to them.
Yes.
But, we saw something on somebody else's podcast last week where they went on board. There's two young lads. They went on board. What's the name of the ship now? Is it Mary?
Yeah.
Queen Mary?
Queen Mary.
That's
it, Queen Mary, yeah.
And they went to this particular room.
That's right.
And they were trying to... I mean, I think they're supposed to be Christians, I'm not sure. But they're trying to invoke this spirit, or Christian friends. That was it.
They said, they had Christian friends with them.
And they're trying to invoke this spirit, and nothing much happens. And then as they leave, as they're leaving the room, I think the radio switched on by itself.
Yeah.
And they then felt that was that spirit trying to tell them to come back and have a conversation. Yeah. And they said, well, if you want to answer yes, knock once. If you want to answer no, knock more than once. And they said they had this full-blown conversation with this spirit, knocking once for yes or several times for no. And then they got to the question, they wanted to ask it something even deeper. They said, does heaven exist? And it knocked no, kind of quite angrily, I think. And then the Christians who were in the room with them said, we need to leave now. Yeah. Because this isn't the spirit of a deceased person. This is a demon imitating a deceased person. And I think a lot of people have had experiences in that room. In that particular room,
didn't they have like inscriptions or something on the people, writings on the wall? And
I think people, when they have an experience, they write it on the wall they've experienced.
Yeah, they'd write down what they'd experienced. Yeah.
But there have been many times, even as a Christian, as a church minister, where I've gone into a place and I've experienced that demonic presence.
Where was that in?
There was a place
Sunday school room.
Yeah, as in Bybury. Yeah, there was a young lad in Bybury who was. I was part of a quote unquote exorcism team in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And there's a young lad in Bybury who was basically trying to kill himself. He kept smashing his head against the wall, doing himself a lot of damage. The dad was severely depressed and suicidal. And the mum was thinking of divorcing him because she just couldn't handle the stress in the home. And it was a really kind of weird set up for the family in a weird scenario, and everything that was taking place is very, very strange. And whilst we were driving to Bybury, somebody in the car had the scripture verse that kept coming back to them: suffer not the little children, let them come unto me. Well, first of all, it's Old King James English, and we kind of didn't use Old King James, but that's the verse that kept coming to him. And then we didn't know what it meant. Suffer not the little children, let them come to me. And we knew it was a verse that Jesus spoke, but what does that have to do with this situation?
Yeah.
When we finally arrived, the young lad was in a bad shape. The dad was in a bad shape. He was kind of almost just completely vacant in his eyes. And so we decided just to kind of look around the land where they lived. And lo and behold, the back garden backed onto a cemetery. And we went into the cemetery of this church. The church they attended was next to the house. And in the centre of the cemetery was this monument, and the monument was to all of these children that had died from a plague that had broken out in that little village sometime in the past. I can't remember the date, but it was sometime in the past. And on top of the monument was, suffer not the little children, let them come unto me. And we were like, kind of cold shivers went down our spine when we saw that. And it's like, this is significant then. There was something in this town, it's something in this village, it's only a small place, that it obviously wiped out all of these children with a disease, a plague. There's some spirit behind this. And we went into the church. The church was lovely. It was light. It was airy. Proper old C of E, proper old chapel place. Absolutely lovely. And then we walked into the Sunday school room, and it's like we were hit by a bulldozer. The weight of oppression that fell on us, the darkness, the wickedness, the evil that was in that Sunday school room. And so there was a demonic spirit in that church building, in that Sunday school room.
Isn't it crazy? In a church
In a
building.
church of all places, right? It was allowed to stay there, and nobody else had recognised it.
Yeah.
But as soon as we went in there, everybody felt it. We all started choking. It was like somebody was trying to strangle us and suffocate us. And the weight of darkness in that room, we felt it. There was a demon in there. And that demon was obviously a demon that was assigned to destroy children. And that's why this young lad was trying to kill himself. And so we left that room quite quickly, went back into the main church hall, got out bread and wine. We took communion, and we prayed, and we asked the Lord to come down by the power of his Spirit, send holy angels into that room and drive that dark spirit out. Once we had done that, we went back into the Sunday school room, and it was as light and airy
Isn't that amazing?
as the rest of the church.
I think, why hasn't that happened before? If that, if it's in a church, they must have realised. They would have felt it themselves.
Maybe they gradually kind of got used to it. Maybe they got used to it over time, or maybe it was something that came on over time. And so, a bit like when you're turning the heat up on they say put a frog in a pan of cold water and turn the heat up, it won't jump out because it gradually gets hotter and hotter until it dies. Maybe it was something like that they just had gotten used to that presence, wasn't aware of it, but it was destroying the family. And then once we got rid of that demon, then we could help the family.
Wow, it's quite it's quite scary, isn't it? Really, it's pretty, but it's. As a Christian, of course, we know...
It's a lot more common than people think.
Yes, that's right. As a Christian, of course, we know the power that we've got within us, like you said, to cast something like that out, to do away with it. But it's scary to think the power, the influence that a demon can have over a person, over even animals, over which whatever,
a whole village.
over a whole whole village,
a
specific area. Yeah, it's and exactly what you said about the oppression thing, that comes back to mind about me thinking about other people that I've spoken to that have had sort of demonic experiences, have said that they've felt like this, almost like a strangling sensation. Like something trying to, this oppression on them.
It's like somebody sitting on your chest. It feels like
trying
that.
To crush your ribs, sort of almost stop you from breathing. I've heard that many a time. And going back to my friend that I said who was a medium, that's exactly one of the things that happened to her. And she used to sort of, she'd gone quite, she'd been doing this medium stuff for quite some time. So she'd obviously opened up a door. She said that she'd be sleeping sometimes and she would feel like something trying to strangle her, and she couldn't move. And sometimes she said she almost stopped breathing for a little bit. But the crazy thing was, I suppose she just wasn't really aware enough of what it was. She didn't seem to think or understand that, right, I need to perhaps pack this in. Yeah. I need to stop this. She didn't realise, because she thought, I've got my spirit guide. So I've got like my ally, if you like, doing whatever. Little does she know that obviously that whatever, saying that it's an ally, is not an ally at all.
No, it's something
a deceiving spirit, exactly. But so she had similar things, and I've heard it a lot. So it's not something to poo-poo away, is it? It's not something like, a lot of people would kind of like say poo-poo the idea, wouldn't they? Because they'd say, whatever. They even though knowing, like, stories we know about, it speaks about demons a lot, but in the Bible, Jesus, we know they're real.
Almost every page of the Gospels, there's somebody being delivered of a demonic spirit.
Exactly.
It's very common.
Mary Magdalene, 7 demonic spirits came out of her, and like the Legion, the chap that was totally possessed, wasn't he? Was he tormented in a graveyard
Roman
or whatever?
Legion's like 5,000 soldiers, so it's a lot of demons.
So there's like loads of stories, isn't there, on and people being possessed by demons.
Yeah, and one of the worst cases I've ever seen of demonic possession was in Banbury, which is in Oxfordshire. I found that out yesterday, by the way, because somebody from Banbury has contacted me on my live stream, and it's in Oxfordshire. I thought it was just outside of Oxford, but it's actually in the county. And we had a Christian gathering down there, and it's a lovely meal. And after the meal, there was time for prayer ministry, and this little tiny lady, no taller than 5 foot, because she came up to my shoulder, same sort of height as you without your big heels on.
I don't know about that.
But she was about 5 foot, not very big,
Yeah.
and I'd say that she was in her kind of middle 60s. And she came forward for prayer, and she was suffering with these headaches and voices and all the kind of the common symptoms. And the minister there, he was an older gentleman, probably in his 70s, very small, very frail. He just laid hands upon her and prayed in the name of Jesus, and all of a sudden, she just started screaming at the top of her lungs, yelling and swearing and blaspheming, just the worst language you can possibly think of. It was all coming out of this little old lady's mouth, right? And it's just like, oh my goodness.
What? Where does this come from?
How does she even know these words, right? But it's all coming out of her, and just such anger and such rage. And long story short, she falls to the ground. She is manifesting these demonic spirits. They are blaspheming God. They are blaspheming Jesus. They're saying that Jesus and God are liars. Don't listen to them, and all of this type of stuff. And she is writhing around. She's hitting herself and beating herself black and blue. And so 3 big men, bigger than me, it must have been over 6 foot each of them, and quite stocky, holding her down. One was on one leg, one was on another leg, one was on the arm, and then there was another lady holding her other arm down.
Yeah.
And this lady, you try this when you get home, not now, but you try this when you get home. You just have one person sit on your arm when it's fully extended, and try and lift them up.
That's right.
Do it. That's an incredible amount of strength.
Yeah, yeah.
And this old lady was picking all 4 of them up. Like this.
Yes, wow.
And they had to, while still holding on to the leg and arm, she was trying to pull away and lift them up, they had to literally jump up in the air and with their body weight, put their weight down to bring the arms back down again, so this other gentleman could lay hands upon her stomach and command the spirit to come out.
Wow.
And after a couple of minutes of this fighting and breaking free and punching the people, because she was very violent, the spirit was cast out, her eyes kind of rolled back down, and she got up. She was just like, why am I on the floor? She didn't know where she was. And when she looked at the people, I mean, the people were battered and bruised and red and swollen. And they said, look at what happened. And she said, I didn't do that, did I? They said, you certainly did. He said, well, it wasn't you, it's the spirit in you, but you certainly did. And she just burst into tears, and she's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. What on earth happened? And that was the most... I've seen lots of cases of exorcism, and that was the most extreme, simply because of the strength.
Especially for a little woman.
Yeah, it's the strength of this woman. Wow. You could have a bodybuilder on steroids, he wouldn't be able to do what she did.
World's strongest man.
Yeah, it was absolutely just... I just stood there in disbelief, like, what on earth is happening?
Yeah.
And I've never seen anything like that before or since.
It's funny you said what you just said about, like, she was like, she couldn't believe what just happened. She wasn't aware of it.
Completely unaware of it.
Exactly. Well, I've seen testimonies on people that have come to Christ, of course, and but that have been very heavily involved in demonic, satanic sort of stuff, doing very much like all funny ritual stuff, whatever. And the one chap was saying that before he came to Christ, he would look in the mirror and he couldn't see himself. All he could see was just dark.
The demon.
Just demonic stuff. Yeah. He could never see his face properly or anything like that. He was so full of demonic stuff and spirits and whatever. He said it was only until he came to Christ. This poor bloke actually tried shooting himself because he was just so infested with demons and spirits and awful stuff. He didn't want to exist anymore, because so even though he kind of wasn't aware of certain things that happened through him, he obviously was aware to a degree, because I think it had gone on a really long time of, there was obviously something controlling him, and it wasn't good. And then when he was, like I say, when he came to Christ, it was an amazing testimony actually. When he did come to Christ, he said for the first time in many years, because he'd been involved in this for a very long time, he could actually see his face in the mirror. After, so yeah, we know, like, there's too many accounts biblically.
So many.
And in today's world now, that we hear of these testimonies, for it to sort of, like I say, to poo-poo it and say that it doesn't exist.
I had a friend, born again Christian. He worked on a psychiatric ward, and obviously a lot of those patients have a lot of problems. But he had to keep his faith to himself, so he didn't wear any crosses or anything like that. And he didn't mention his faith. He just had to work as a nurse in this place. One day he's walking down, and there's a new person in the bed. And he goes up and talks to them. They kind of like hunch back in the bed. And they look at him and say, "You're a Christian. Stay away from me."
Wow. All right.
And the spirit inside of that person knew.
They know, because they say that God's light shines out of a person. That's what we're here for, isn't it? We're to be lights in this world.
Yeah, and I remember the story as well. Some time ago, there's a psychiatrist or psychologist. I think it's a psychiatrist. And he said he didn't believe in demonic spirits, just believed it was all mental illness. And he was invited to go along to an exorcism. And he was like, I'll go along.
Whatever,
It's just mental illness.
Yeah.
And after experiencing a real exorcism, he turned around and said, "What on earth is that?" And the exorcist turned around and said, "That is what you do not believe in." Because, and once again, we're here saying not every kind of mental illness is demonic. Not every fit is demonic. Not every illness is demonic. Of course it's not. We don't see demons under every rock. But the reality is we are living in a spiritual world as well as a physical one.
Yes. Yeah.
And unless you are on Jesus's side, you're in a very, very sticky situation.
Yeah, because you're on your own in a way. You've chosen, haven't you? We know God loves everyone and he wants the best for everyone, but equally he gives us a choice. And I suppose in a way, like you said, if you haven't given your life to Christ, you're kind of, you're sort of on your own. God's always there, isn't he?
Yeah.
But you're open to more attack, aren't you? And you're not, you're more kind of vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, God is always willing to accept you into his kingdom and to give you eternal life the moment you repent and trust in Jesus.
Correct, yeah.
But that's a free will decision.
That's right, yeah.
And so long as we reject Christ, we're kind of staying in darkness, and then we're open to all kinds of attacks.
It's like there's only one or the other, isn't it? There's no kind of grey area, isn't it? You've either got light and all goodness and righteousness and everything that's holy and great and of God, or you've got darkness. And what king are you serving, isn't it? You've only got one or the other, isn't it? So
you're either in God's territory or the enemy's territory, so you've got to make a decision.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously some people would say that don't even believe in demons or angels or whatever, would just say that it is a deceased person, wouldn't they? And especially if it mimics certain things that person did.
Has knowledge,
so it's... And
that's once again, not to say that all psychics and mediums are contact, because like 99% of them are fakes.
Yeah, exactly.
They're hucksters.
Yeah, they just sort of
they're in it for the money. They make stuff up.
That's right. Yeah.
But there is that element out there where people have genuinely tapped into something demonic.
I think so.
And they've had knowledge and experiences that have really done them a lot of damage.
Yeah.
At first, it's very promising, and there's lots of promise of prosperity and excitement and all of that. But then, as you get deeper and deeper into it, it ends up destroying you. And
when you see you've seen some of these people that are very into it, if it's over a long period of time, they can actually begin to look quite ill.
Yeah. And
quite full of darkness and quite depressed and quite whatever. And you wouldn't normally see them looking very joyous or very happy and whatever, would you? It's generally the person seems very depressed, very down, very... And
it's and when you come across a lot of people who are these mediums or psychics or spiritual healers, it's how sick they are themselves, how ill they become, and they claim to have this healing power and things. And it's kind of like, hold on. Where's that power coming from? If if it's making you so depressed and so emotional and so psychologically fragile, and that's not God.
I think they get so wrapped up in it, they almost become, like you said, they're so unaware in a way, because they're so into it and wrapped up in it, they don't even see it. So they're just,
Well, we shall talk about this further.
Yes, yeah.
On other podcasts.
On another podcast, yeah.